Hey, good evening.
Ellis? Here. Martin Chapa?
Here.
David Garcia?
Here.
Joseph Ruiz?
Here.
James Lucy? Here. Donna Salinas?
Here.
Brian Kuthal is here. Let the record show there is a quorum of board members present, and that this meeting has been posted in accordance with Government Code Chapter 551, State of Texas Open Meeting Act. We move to the moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I place this flag, I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one day, under God, one nation.
is being live video streaming. We move now to item number 4, which is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Motion made by Mr. Salinas. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Morales. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 7, public participation. We have anyone who has signed up to address the board?
No, sir.
Thank you. Item number 6 is communication from administration. Superintendent's update, which can be found on page 2 of our packet. We'll be dealing with the A through F accountability redesign. Dr. Pettis.
Okay, I've given each of you a handout that has really just 2 pages. The Commissioner of Education, he had a Zoom with all of the superintendents in Texas last week, and just reiterate the fact that the A through F refresh is still happening. But the slide that really has kind of been the bottom line of everything, and that sent a very clear message, is the fact that the evaluation the evaluation instrument will be very different this year. The 2022 ratings and 2023 ratings will be using different methodologies, and that's what it says on the slide. Because of the A through F refresh, school year 2022-2023 ratings will be based on a different set of rules than previously. The 2022 ratings and 2023 ratings cannot be compared side by side. It is possible that a campus with an A rating in 2022 may improve academically, like their scores may improve this year, but in 2023, they could still drop to a B. and so forth. So no matter what the grade is, it's still possible that, most likely possible, that they will drop. It goes on to say it's not a simple apples to apples comparison this year. We have not received any of the scores for the elementary or middle school. And we've really kind of received maybe raw data for the high school. They did have a scale score, and looking at the high school, which we were very, I guess, improvement in every single EOC subject and of course subject. Some as much as 21%, some as much as 13%, 14%, even on apples to apples, like English 1 to English 2 grew by 21%. But the only problem is that now that they changed the rules. So many people have compared it to, they keep moving the goalpost. Okay, you can kick the ball from 40 yards away, now we're gonna move it, you know, when you've been practicing for 40 yards away. So there's a lot of concern about this. Many superintendents have urged, and I am too, encourage to let them know that you have concerns about the fact that, or that we have concerns about the fact that it's, you know, we just want a level playing field for it to be fair, especially considering the students have been through a historic pandemic. They've been a lot of, with school safety, there's been a lot of things. So to do the redesign at the same time that they're changing the accountability system is like a double whammy. They're changing the way they're testing, and then they're changing the way they're holding us accountable. So it's very concerning. Right now, there are special sessions occurring in the 88th legislature because there was a school finance bill that was not approved or adopted. And so they kind of have us in limbo on that as well. When they sent us the raw scores, they sent us charts that said likely passed, zone of uncertainty, and then likely did not pass. That zone of uncertainty, you know, there's a lot of zone of uncertainty right now with finance and with accountability, and because they haven't determined where they're going to do that cut score, I guess you could say. So the first ones that they got to us were the high school, because many of them needed them for graduation. There were many districts that had already graduated by the time we got these. So, you know, they were in a little bit different situation. So we were kind of lucky that we at least got them before we graduated. But it was a big rush to get things accomplished. So I just wanted to let you know where we are at this point. It was, like I said, it was like we were on a roller coaster. That morning we got the high school scores, our CNI department, and we were excited that there was growth. But then by 10 o'clock, we got the call from the commissioner, and it was all about, even if you improve, you're going to drop, you know, most likely. So just, you know, it's, and when I went to present to the high school and shared with them the good news about their scores, unfortunately, Dr. Williams was there and Miss Odie was there. You know, it was kind of like, I've got good news, but then I've also got this other news, you know. So, but, you know, we wanted to make sure that we praise the teachers and everybody who supported them also to make gains. So I want to let you know where we're at right now.
And we won't even know the rules until August or something, right?
Correct.
So that's what's, I mean, this is it's absolutely crazy.
I'm sure we'll hear a lot about it at SOI.
No hostage, but nonetheless. All right. We move now to item number 7, which is new business discussion and possible action regarding purchases over $50,000. This can be found on page 3 and 4 of our packet. Dr. Pickens.
Thank you, Mr. Kufal, Dr. Pettis, members of the board. Currently, the adoption for math has been pushed back. It actually we won't have a new adoption until 26-27, which means that we have to buy math materials every single year out of either our instructional materials allotment or general fund. So this is something that they don't give us extra money for. They just push it back. Now, luckily, we have just over $400,000 in our instructional materials allotment. So with that in mind, if you look at Great Minds, that first one, this is the curriculum next year for elementary math. Just that would be $108,000. Would come from the instructional materials allotment. Again, right now we have a little over $400,000. We're gonna need between $16,000 and $18,000 in professional development in July for the teachers. That cannot come out of the instructional material allotment. That's why you see 1993 local. So $16,000 to $18,000 would come out of local for that purchase. If you look at the Carnegie Learning, that's a middle school math curriculum. We're talking this year just a little over 52,000. Again, most of that is for the curriculum that will come out of the instructional materials allotment. But then we also, for the professional development, we also have a grant right now for Gillette that we have to use before September 30th. So we're planning to use everything that we have left in the grant, probably be about $20,000 in the 2113 ESF funds and anything that's left over in local. So the majority of both of these purchases will come out of the instructional materials line. I'll take any questions that you have.
Dr. Pitts,
Yes,
in the goods, are there any, for example, TI calculators or anything that you're gonna purchase that is different from
there
curriculum?
are manipulatives.
At the elementary, the purchase comes with manipulatives that align to the curriculum. We did an inventory of our current manipulatives and they do not overlap. So when we purchase this, it'll be a one-time and then our cost will just be for the books. We currently are using Sharon Wells, which we wait on printing for grades 2 through 5, and we've had some well, with the printing, it's also an additional cost. So with this one, we won't be printing, they'll get it all at one time. And then we'll be providing coaching and professional development with the Eureka map.
So
And for the Carnegie math, the secondary, it comes with an online digital component and the print materials and the materials for the teachers. But as far as calculators themselves, they do not come with calculators.
Is this a one-time purchase or is it a recurring cost every year?
most of it is reoccurring. The cost for materials for the consumables is. The manipulatives is not. The professional development is not unless we need more. There's also going to be some coaching that will be with next year's budget, but the cost of that is around $16,000 for next year. That will cover all the materials. Well, right, and they only give you enough for those adoptions that you're looking at for that biennium. So we have again $410,000 that we need to make last. Now we're not going to get any money this next year, but we are going to get money the following year. I think science is the next one that is coming up that they're going to give us more money. But if we do the adoption and we don't use all the money for science, that's where we have the pot left over. That's why we have over $410,000 in there now, because whatever you don't use luckily carries over.
So you'll have money for next year, then hopefully you'll get some more money. Okay. Okay. Get it. And ESF, did y'all apply for the new ESF grant?
We did. We haven't received notice yet. But we received that.
For Gillette only,
Oh, okay.
not for Harold.
Harold's doing too well. I guess so.
Well, now, we're applying.
They're like tiles and counters and things like that, yes.
So we're getting things for this year. What says? What do we have that says, doesn't say that they're gonna change it next year to where we get new ones?
They will not, it's not changed it's not changed annually, it is, right, it's a current curriculum that doesn't change based on testing or anything like that. It's one that we're using. Plus, they're applying for to be a one that we can adopt when the math adoption comes up. So fingers crossed.
So in 2026, 2027 is when the new curriculum and the new adoption will take place from now.
So, but we're expecting that in 2028, they're not gonna come up with something new and we'll say, well, something, now you gotta switch again.
Right.
They'll usually adopt it for 7 or more years in this case.
And they've been working with the state. It's considered a high quality instructional material through the state.
Any other questions? If not, you've heard the presentation and the recommendation from administration that we approve these purchases over $50,000. Do I have a motion to that effect? So moved. Motion made by Mr. Ruiz. Seconded by Ms. Salinas. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 8, closed session. The board will now enter into closed session in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Government Code 551.071 and 551.074 to deliberate and consider the following. A, consider and deliberate regarding the resignation of a contracted employee. Consider and deliberate regarding the employment of contracted personnel. Consider and deliberate regarding the employment of contracted personnel. Discussion of status of potential real estate transactions, and discussions with legal counsel regarding legal and personnel matters. No action will be taken until we return. We are entering closed session at 5:44 p.m.
Mr. President, if I could just say something that we can, I wanted to mention earlier, just slipped my mind. We need to be in prayer for one of our teachers whose husband passed away. So we just gotta be in prayer for the family. One of our school district members.
Thank you. All right. Do we want to retire to the back? Or how hard would it be to get Mr. Maddox in the? But.
But to be in the other.
We need to have other open other links. Closed session.
Let's do that. Which I would have. Can you hear it?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right. We now return to open session and take necessary action on matters which the board may discuss in open session upon which action may be taken. We are returning to open session at 6:34 p.m. Item A, discussion and possible action regarding the resignation of contracted employee diagnostician.
Administration recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the resignation as presented in executive session.
Heard the recommendation of administration. Is there a motion to that effect? Motion made by Ms. Salinas. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. B, discussion and possible action regarding the employment of contracted personnel, diagnosticians.
Administration recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the contracted employees as presented in executive session for the position of diagnostician.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Morales, seconded by Ms. Salinas. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Item C, discussion and possible action regarding the employment of contracted personnel literacy coach.
Administration recommends that the Board of Trustees approve the contracted employee as presented in executive session for the position of literacy coach.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve? Motion made by Mr. Glusing, seconded by Ms. Salinas. Any further discussion? If motion carries 7-0. Item D, discussion and possible action regarding potential real estate transaction. Oh. All those in favor of item C, the literacy coach, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Item D, thank you. Item D, discussion and possible action regarding potential real estate transaction. All right, board.
Make a motion that we accept the 625.
All right. Motion made by Mr. Chapa and seconded by Mr. Glusing. Can we condition your motion on?
Yes, with the clause, first right of refusal.
All right. For explanatory purposes, for anyone who may be watching this, we were approached a year and a half ago by someone wanting to buy some property the school district owned. We have taken our time in having the property properly appraised. We have had the property sale appropriately posted. Entertaining bids. We received a bid that this motion is to accept that bid with the condition that a right of first refusal clause be added so that if the business does not use this property for its intended purpose, that KISD would have an opportunity to repurchase this property. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Motion carries 6-1. The record reflects that Ms. Salinas voted no. There being no further action, this meeting of the special meeting of the board of KISD is being declared adjourned at 6:39 p.m. and we will now conduct a work 2022-2023 TASB pay system review, which is found on page 16 to 38 of our packet, and then the 2023-2024 proposed academic and athletic stipends, which can be found on page 39 to 41 of our packet. Dr. Pitts.
We have contracted with TASB for a pay maintenance study. Cost of that service is $4,000. What we get for that service is we compare every employee in our district, their salary, to comparable employees in other districts. This makes sure that we are competitive, especially important in this environment. Ever since COVID came along, it's been very difficult to attract quality employees, and we've been working really hard to get our salaries district-wide comparable to market value. So I'm going to introduce Jennifer Barden. She's here from TASB. She's going to talk about the pay study. And when she's done, these stipends. Let me hand it over to Jennifer Barden from TASB.
Good evening, everyone. I am very excited to be here. As Dr. Pitt said, I am Jennifer Barton, an HR and compensation consultant with TASB HR Services. So I am filling in today for one of our other consultants, Keith, who's been working with the district. However, I'm very familiar with everything tonight. And because we are in a workshop format, please don't hesitate to ask questions and to feel good about this information. I'm happy to explain or help you understand any of it. And what I can't do, Dr. Pitts can also help for district information. The other thing that I did tell Dr. Pitts is that you get to receive board training credit tonight since it's workshop format. I know board members always like that. So we'll make sure that we get your certificate and we'll just get your names and we'll get that submitted this evening too. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started today. As Dr. Pitts said, we are going to review the pay systems maintenance process that we did this year. And I'm going to do just a little bit about the process. Since this is a workshop format, we want to make sure you get your compensation piece in here so you can get your board training tonight. So every year, whenever we engage, we as a district and TASB HR Services engage together in the pay study or pay maintenance process, we go through pretty much the same process that we do every year. Work with the district to determine what goals they have for compensation, what they're looking for, any challenges that they're having that we can address through pay system maintenance. And then we also collect the pay data and any type of processes that we do with the compensation plan in the district. And we have lots of conversations at the very beginning. Once we gather that data, we have an analyst that works with the consultant on this project that cleans up data. We look at the market and we'll talk a little bit about the market and what that looks like for pay system maintenance here in just a minute. And then we match common jobs. In school districts across Texas, we benchmark for about 150 jobs, not every single job we may see in a district, but the most common jobs. And we look for those jobs and comparisons. And so we do that through our salary survey. Because this is a maintenance process, we actually look at your current models and we adjust them as needed. So we adjust employee pay, we adjust structures to ensure that the district remains competitive for all employee groups. We also look at individual pay for individuals in the district to ensure that they are competitive towards a competitive rate as individual pay. Just remember that there are some objectives that we have with compensation in schools and with our pay system and why we do this every single year. We want to use our pay system to recruit employees into the district. So we are looking for that great talent, whether that's teachers, other educational professionals, or hourly jobs. Everybody has a role in a school district, and we want to ensure that we're recruiting that great talent in and that we are retaining our employees. You know, those employees that are loyal to us, that have been with us for multiple years, we want to make sure that they have strong pay also. So those are two of the objectives that we look at. When we're thinking about recruitment, we're thinking about strong entry rates. That could be pay minimums for our hour pay when we do bring maybe someone into a single incumbent position that brings a certain unique set of skills or talents that we're looking for in our district. With retention, we want to make sure that we are advancing pay to market rates as quickly as we can for competitive pay increases each year, again, within our budgeted means. We also want to make sure for all of our jobs that we are paying for job value. So we don't really want to overpay or underpay for jobs, but we also want to make sure that we are paying premiums for the jobs that we need to be able to retain and recruit that talent. And we also want to make sure that for any employees that maybe are considered under market, are advancing their pay as quickly as we can over time. And then, of course, and this is obviously a big objective for the board, we want to make sure that we are controlling costs. So every school district has a limited budget. Unfortunately, this year, we don't have a lot of money yet from the legislature. We don't know what's going to happen. And so we need to make sure that we are being conservative and controlling those costs. And of course, Dr. Pitts will have more for that later on, but we help the district with some of these processes to help with budget and going into that process for the year. When we're thinking about a pay system, we have this all in place in your compensation system, but we want to make sure around that mark, that target value based on their experience. For each pay grade, we do have a maximum and a minimum that we look at. And every year, the reason that you use TASB is because we can look at that market value. We help adjust your structures to remain competitive. And so these are just some strategies that we use for pay system control. What we help you do is assess the job value accurately to help keep your pay ranges competitive by making those adjustments to structures as needed. We also help you control pay of spread between the job incumbents across that pay grade. We also help you find ways to accelerate employees to market pay and to budget sufficiently for the pay increases each year. Before I move into specific district data, does anybody have a question about the process?
I actually have a question. So when you're looking at teachers, are you looking at teachers as a whole, or do you take into account like strictly district sizes or?
Right, so that's
variables.
So that's a great question. So when we're looking at all employees, we are looking at a specific market that we're looking at here. And so this list is the districts that we are comparing to. So we would consider this your market, which is really your geographic area that that the district competes in. So when we're looking at teachers and all employees, we're looking at your local market, which we consider school districts. But we also do pull in some non-school market values because we know that there are some jobs that compete out in the private sector and that the district's competing against that.
In addition to teachers, you're also looking at administration.
Correct.
To make sure you're not too top heavy.
We're looking at all pay groups. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Anybody else? Okay, so this is the market peer list. We have about 21 data points here, and then you have a lot of asterisks over here. And so where we see some of those asterisks, we see that the district, that particular district did not participate in our salary survey. However, we were able to pull teacher schedules and some other market data from those districts. We were also able to pull market from the districts that have the X's. So these are going to be the districts that Kingsville ISD competes with in a geographic area. And so we kind of think about it where Kingsville's in the middle and we look out surrounding. And this market list is approved by district. This is something that we've been using for years. This is not anything new that we have done in our process. As I said, we also use non-school market whenever we are looking for particular positions that are not included in the TASB salary survey, and or those positions such as technology, some business positions, some other specific unique positions we have in school districts that we don't have local school market for. We use TASB HR Services pays for 2 third-party vendors, Economic Research Institute or ERI and Comp Analyst, and we look for that non-school market in the Corpus Christi metro area because they're the closest metro area to this district. Now we'll move into our first employee group we're going to discuss tonight, and that would be teachers. And so when we say teachers, that is teacher and librarians, and they also have some instructional positions on the teacher structure. The first thing that we look at for information purposes for the district is demographics. So when we do the maintenance process with the district, we do a snapshot of data. So this is based on a moment in time, but with the understanding that, you know, the data is always fluid throughout the year. So at the time of this study, there was about a little over 200 teachers and librarians and other instructional positions on the teacher structure. And this is the distribution of the years of experience for those individuals. And so you can see the pie is cut, you know, pretty, not necessarily evenly, but I mean, you can see a very nice distribution there that you have lots of different years of experience. You do have some that are up in the retirement area, about 13 teachers at that 30+ years. And then you are recruiting in, you know, a good amount of teachers, but you do have a nice distribution there. You're not too top, you know, heavy in certain areas. Then looking at newly hired individuals to your district on this structure, we see that there's about 20 teachers at the time of this study that had 0 years of experience. So that means they are brand new to the profession. And so you've recruited about 65% are at that 0 year, but you also were able to recruit in some teachers or positions on this structure that have additional years of experience, which is a good thing. We're going to move into the market comparison for teachers and other individuals on this structure. So looking at the market graph, the orange line is Kingsville ISD and the blue line is local market median. So when we're looking at the market median, is the median of the market list that we showed you in a few slides prior. And what we see here at all of the surveyed years is that, well, except year 0, that Kingsville ISD is a little bit below the market median. And something that we have to consider every year is that the market does shift about 2%. So when we're thinking about that and trying to maintain or to be competitive in our salaries for all employees, teachers included, we always want to keep that in mind when we're thinking about our pay raises. But at this time, I mean, I know the district's been working on being more competitive in this area. And so we can see that the slope of the line is what we would like to see, that there's not major gaps at any specific area. We just want to try to get the line as along the median as quickly as we can. But with that being said, we know we have a limited budget. So when we translate this graph into values, you can see each of the years, the surveyed years, we surveyed for 0 through 20, and where the dollar difference is and the percentage difference that you are from market. And so you can see that at 10 years, you are furthest from market, or about $1,500 or 97% below market. And then at your 0 years, or that starting pay for teachers, you are even with market median. So you're most competitive at 0 years, and then you're least competitive at 10 years right now. And you can see the differences there for your market. Questions on your market before I move into teaching area statements?
If we go back on graph to the market graph, and Dr. Hitch, you know, gave us this, if Corpus Christi ISD was not included in that, what would this look like?
That's that we don't have the individual data, we can't break that out. But so chances are, since it's median, it's not averaged together at all. So it wouldn't be that different. It'd probably be one school removed. But you don't have that data with you either, do you?
I don't have it right here. The thing about if we were to take Corpus out, you know, you could do that, but you compete with Corpus Christi. And so that's the concern. So
Yes.
So you don't think that you lose teachers to Corpus Christi? I'm just asking.
I
I
don't
don't think so.
we lose Corpus, we lose teachers to Corpus. And I think that, I don't know this because we don't have this information here, but my guess is their scale is one of the higher of the group that is in here.
No, I actually, I was brought up in one of our trainings, how Aransas, they lose a lot of people, like Gregory, Or then they're higher.
Right,
And
right, right, but that's, you know, a 45-minute drive to a teacher in Kingsville is significant. Especially, you know, to get to a school in Corpus isn't laid out great from a traffic standpoint. Valfures, Fremont, Robstown, San Gertrudis, Alice, Ricardo, Rivera, Sarita. London would probably be the closest that might be. Toloso is easier to get to. Cal Allen, but Corpus proper, and if they're skewed higher, and I would guess that they probably would be because they're the largest of the groups here. I'm just interested in knowing what that would look like, because we
We can get that information for you.
we push this every year, we get up, and I understand that everything moves. But I have a hard time believing that, you know, when we move 2%, everybody else moves 4%. Year after year after year after year with limited budgets. And I would be personally interested in seeing what this looks like without the Corpus district in.
You also have, Gregory Portland, for example, and we talked about that. They've got those big plants going in and they're gonna be starting really, really high. So they're going to be a magnet for teachers. Huge magnet.
So I hear your point that if we take out some of those schools, then really we're probably even more competitive than the graph. And right now, we've really raised salaries the last 2 years to be more competitive and make sure we attract the best personnel here, especially because it's harder to attract people because of after COVID. So I think you're right. I think we're even more competitive than that graph
And
suggests.
a question that's gonna be coming to you in a while, maybe not tonight, but down the road is. The teachers are the only state employees that have not been given a raise. Because we don't have a finance bill, if that. And so out of all the other state employees, teachers have not been given a raise dictated by the state. And that was one of the big priorities. And coming out of the special legislative session will probably be some mandatory increases, supposedly paid for by the state. Does that factor into this? I mean, do you take those mandatory raises and then adjust to, because everybody else is going to be adjusted? So does everybody just slide? And that's not an answer that we can provide tonight, because we don't know what that's going to be until we actually get an approved bill.
No, we can't answer that tonight, but I can tell you that before the bills died, that the bill language basically was not going to require districts to add on top. So at the time, the bill language did not have that. So essentially, if for some reason like this year, you did not get enough to meet the mandate, then the next school year you could do more like a settle up, right? And you could make sure that you were providing the next year, to where, you know, I think there was maybe a misunderstanding with House Bill 3. People felt like they had to put more on top, but what really happened was they didn't do enough to be in compliance. And so the initial bill language did not require districts to do that. What comes out this summer, we don't know, but I will say we monitor a lot of that. And we're also monitoring with TASBO. And at this point, we don't anticipate that that's going to be the case, even if you do give things. So we don't know, though. We don't have a magic 8 ball.
And it would be pretty much across the board. So if you didn't make up the gap this year and everybody increases based on that, the gap would still exist. And if anybody does add on top, then the gap's going to get even more.
Kind of like what we saw with household.
Well, the good thing is that TASB looks at providing adjustments for those gaps in there. So let's say we decided on a certain percentage increase. Those areas that are farther, TASB also works to close those as well on top of the increase that every employee gets.
And there was a lot of talk though, because the base teacher salary for Texas is like $33,000, which we pay
50,000.
50,000, to begin with, So they may say you must pay teachers so much percentage over the base salary of $33,000. And if we're already there, that's a different discussion, so people don't understand that some of the language that comes out is not as clear cut as, everybody thinks, okay, I'm gonna get, a certain raise, and it's like, well, that's not what the state, what they said was over the base salary, and the base salary in Texas is 33,000, which is hard to believe that some districts have that salary, but it does exist.
All right, we're good to move on. All right, perfect. The other thing that we look at with teachers are our teaching area stipends. So we're not looking at every single stipend that we offer in the district. Dr. Pitts is going to talk about that later. But we do look at specific areas for hard to fill or critical need, and we benchmark for these particular stipends. So these stipends that are included on this slide are the ones that we benchmark for that are provided by the district. You can see the values that Kingsville ISD provide, the median stipend, and then how many districts out of that list that we talked about that provided this data, the survey data, who reported that they are providing that particular stipend. And so this, again, is for information. This is market information.
I wanted to point out, you see that second line master's degree subject area, we're the only one that does that, but we only have 4 teachers that are still grandfathered that we haven't reduced their stipend because, again, nobody else does it. So we did away with it years ago, but those that have been here forever, we have continued, and there's still 4 employees receiving that right.
We cannot.
Not anymore, not for new employees coming.
Okay, so now we're going to move into our other employee groups, and we're going to look at market comparisons. So on this slide, we have our administrative professional group, which is broken into 3 different pay groups for market. So that would be central administration, campus administration, professional, and then we have our hourly. So let's start with our administrative professional group. The 3 different market comparisons, the group comparisons. In central administration, we are looking at directors and above. For campus administration, we are looking at principals and assistant principals. And then in the professional group, we are looking at all of your other exempt personnel. So that could be technology, business, HR. It would also be school counselors and all of your special education related services. And then it could be any other professional that would be in that group, like an athletic trainer, behavior specialist, things along that line. So just so you kind of have an idea of what employees fall into those particular groups.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Also teachers would fall into that professional category as well there?
Teachers would not. We already looked at teachers, so this is going to be your other professionals. But you might have an instructional coach comparison in there, even if they are on the teacher structure, because that is considered a professional position. This would also have librarians in this group.
And counselors?
And counselors and nurse. And then your speech, your special ed. So for those 3 groups, so we're looking at our administrative professional, these are our exempt groups. You can see where the comparisons are overall for that group. So remember this is an average. We are looking at averages here. So for your directors and above or central administration, you're about 7% above market. Your campus administration, about 2% below market, and professionals are also 2% below market. The other thing that we look at with this particular group, your administrative professionals, is the pay grade midpoint to market. When we're talking about our midpoint, that is our market value. And so you can see that our midpoints for all groups here are strong, and that's what we want to see. We adjust them a little bit every year to make sure that they remain competitive. And when you have competitive midpoints, that means that it helps move employee pay to be more competitive over time.
One thing I would like to point out is when you're looking at that second column, that's apples to apples. You're comparing a teacher with the same number of years of experience as another district. When you look at the first column, that varies. In other words, we may pay a teacher with 20 years of experience at the same as another group, but if they may have less experience in our district. So when you see those 98% and 99 and 98%, that's just because the people in those positions have less experience, because if you look at apples in the actual pay structure, we are above in the pay structure.
Correct.
What is benchmarks?
Benchmarks means it is the job that we're comparing them to. So a benchmark is a benchmark job is a job most commonly seen in school districts across Texas. We only benchmark for about 150 because those are the ones we see more often from small districts to large districts. Okay. All right, so we also break your hourly jobs into 3 different pay groups for market comparisons. So clerical paraprofessional are going to be your administrative assistants. It will be any of your hourly employees that are in business or HR, and will also be some of your hourly technology positions. Instructional support are going to be campus-facing positions, your educational aides, both special education and general education. This could also be LVNs. And then your auxiliary will be everything on the operations side of the house. So you would have bus drivers, cafeteria workers, you would have maintenance, all of those type of positions. So looking at your hourly market comparisons for clerical paraprofessional, you're about 1% below market, but to Dr. Pitts's point, the pay grade midpoint is strong there. It's about 1% above. Your instructional support is about 2% above market, and auxiliary is about 2% below. The other thing that we look at with our hourly group is we look at their pay grade minimum to market. That is basically their starting rates on average. So on average, your clerical paraprofessional are about 2% below market for starting pay. Instructional support's about 5% above market, and auxiliary is about 4% above market. So 2 of the 3 groups are strong. All of them are competitive to market, but 2 are very strong above market there.
One thing I would like to point out, so if you look at the second column, even with those other districts like Corpus Christi and Gregory Portland, we are very competitive with those in there. And you want to see us to be close to 100%. You don't want to see us at 120%. You don't want us to see us paying way more than anybody else or way less than everybody else. But we worked really hard the last 2 years to we've given those largest pay increases KISD has ever given in the last 2 years. And that has been to be able to get to this point, and you see that we're really close to 100% across the board.
Food service and janitors, bus drivers, is that all in the auxiliary?
Yes. So now we're going to move into our recommendations. So recommendation number 1 is, as I said, we made adjustments to the pay structures. For teachers, we rebuild the structure each year based on available budget, what we've had discussions with the district, and how much we want to provide for each continuing teacher, as well as those additional adjustments for market competitiveness and to help strengthen certain years in the structure. And then for our non-teachers, we adjust to make sure that that midpoint or market value is competitive. And what we also do with the pay structures is we look at improving those starting salaries and making sure that we are trying to get our starting salary not only for hourly, but for our exempt positions strong, so we can recruit in great talent to our district. We also align those midpoints with market to make sure they are strong, and you can see your midpoints are strong. We just did those comparisons. And then we also make sure that the jobs within the district in those different structures are aligned within pay grades, and district basically administers that, but they make sure all of those jobs are aligned appropriately. We also recommendation number 2, that the district adopt a general pay increase for all employees. There are 3 models for consideration. There is a 1%, 1.5%, and 2%. And we have provided estimates for the district for all 3 percentages. For teachers, they will receive the general pay increase calculated as a percentage of the market median salary. And then for other pay groups, your non-teachers, the GPI is calculated as a percentage of the employee's pay grade midpoint. So their individual pay grade, the midpoint of that pay grade. And this is what the teacher salary would look like for a 1% increase. So again, remember that Kingsville is the orange, the median is the blue. The green dotted line is actually where the pay increase would move you. Remember that we will see a shift in the market, but this is what we would see right now. So the green line is a little bit above the market median at 0 years. but we're getting a lot closer at 5 years. And you can see how it shifts there. So that is the 1%. This is the 2%. So again, we're seeing that green line move even closer to the median, which is what we would like to see. And then, or this is 1.5, I'm sorry, and then this would be 2%.
This is Mark.
Yes.
So Governor Abbott didn't do any increases at all, right?
So the legislature has not passed anything for education yet.
Do you know if they're gonna address that in the special session?
We don't know yet. I would say yes, because they have to put money towards education, but I think it's probably going to be a little bit later.
So hypothetically speaking, if they were to give the increase, would that justify?
We honestly don't know. We don't know. I would say that what we are recommending to districts is pass a pay increase that you think you can afford as a district at this point. If something comes through later on, you can make adjustments accordingly.
And so it should always get better. Nobody's gonna.
Yes,
care
I would say
if others
be
go up-
conservative,
up a little.
what you can afford, but you also have to realize, right, we're trying to hire people, and if we want to wait, that's also not probably the best strategy at this point, right? So it's a balancing act, but I think being conservative to start, as you said, you could always add a little later if required. Okay, recommendation number 3. So as Dr. Pitts said, we not only look at every employee receiving a certain amount of money, we also look at individual salaries to ensure that their employees are having competitive salaries, right? Or we're moving to market. So we do provide some additional adjustments to certain employees depending on their individual salary and where it lies in the market. So remember I said that we do adjust structures, we adjust those pay grades. So for once we apply the general pay increase for any employee's salary that is below the minimum of the pay grade, we will apply an additional 1% to move them into the range. This will just ensure that brand new employees with 0 years of experience are not going to leapfrog over that veteran employee. We also have applied some strategic adjustments to help move some of those salaries a little quicker to midpoint. We talked a little bit about the educator career pathway. So we do have teachers that promote into jobs such as counselor, assistant principal, and we want to ensure that their salaries are competitive and more than what they would be making in the classroom. So we do adjust their salaries slightly if they would be below what they would be making with the same years of experience in the classroom. And then for our hourly groups, we have applied a placement scale to the pay grades. And what that does is it looks at years of experience and aligns employees by those years of experience to make sure that we alleviate any compression that would happen by an increase in starting salary and moving them towards midpoint a little bit quicker than we would without those adjustments. And so we, as I said, we have 3 models to consider, and this is the cost estimate. And so we look at the individual pay groups. So you have 4 pay groups in the district: teachers and librarians. And as I said, you have a couple of other instructional positions in that group. Administrative professional are going to be all of your administrators and your professionals. So anyone that would be considered an exempt employee that is not on the teacher and librarian structure. So it would be your key directors and above. It would be your campus principals and assistant principals, but it's also your counselors, special education related services, athletic trainers, like, you know, all of those individuals that you have, nurses, things like that. They all fall into that group. Your clerical paraprofessional group would be, again, your administrative assistants, your business and HR positions, receptionists, clerks, things like that. And then as well as educational aides. And then auxiliary would be all of your operations side of the house. And so looking at your cost estimate, you have the general pay increase. So that is the general pay increase, or GPI percentage, that every employee will receive that percent. The adjustment column is going to be where those individual adjustments are applied to individual employees. And then we have the total increase. Again, this is an estimate based on a snapshot in time. And so we have the 1% estimate, 1.5, and our 2%.
Dr. Pitts,
Yes, sir.
you take a look at these numbers, they all fit in the budget?
we're gonna have a big discussion about that as soon as this presentation is done. Yes, we're gonna look at all of this. One thing that I would like to point out is, could you go back to model 1? So you notice there's 2 columns. There's one for the general pay increase, 1%. But then the adjustments are the ones that are lagging behind market value. So if you notice, there's 249,000 actually even above the general pay increase to get those positions that are below market to market. But then if you go to 1.5%, right, it's lower because as you give a bigger general pay increase, there's less that lag behind market wise. And as you go to model 3, it's even lower, 195,000. So the difference between them, like look at 639 for 2% versus 558 versus 471. And that's because again, as you give a higher general pay increase, there's less additional cleanup you have to do to get the lagging behind groups closer to market value.
That is the end of my presentation, but I am happy to entertain any other questions before I turn it over to Dr. Pitts.
You see in your studies, when you're looking at the whole area as to who we compete with, as far as people in jobs that have the higher, for example, special ed paraprofessionals. Is there a difference in how they pay in the area as far as they pay more for this job and less for this job because of what's happening and what they have to deal with?
Yeah, depending on the position, you typically see some variance. So paraprofessionals are great educational aides.
Mhm.
So you have your educational aides that we would consider general education, maybe supporting the general ed classroom. They could be in a library, in the computer. And then we have special education aides that do different things, correct? So we have some that work with maybe students that have challenges, but maybe not as severe as what we would see in certain classrooms. So there's a continuum, right, of what we see in special education classrooms. So what we do see sometimes in districts is sometimes there's a variance between pay. Dr. Pitts can talk more about what that looks like in Kingsville ISD for educational aides. But yes, in the market, we typically see a little bit of difference between general education and special education aides. Same with teachers, because they receive those extra stipends usually with teachers.
2 pieces of information that would be useful for me. One, if we could get this run without what we're saying, I'd be very interested in seeing that. The second one is on all of these costs. If we could know what the population of those 4 groups is, we've got about 250 probably teachers and librarians.
It's actually closer to about 100, 180, maybe 175, somewhere in there.
And in each one of those, I think it's going to be something that we may need to look at on a percentage basis of, in other words, this could work out to where your bus drivers get 1% and others get less or more, based on the number of people involved in this. And it's not going to be in the general pay increase because that's flat percentage, but it is going to be in some of the adjustment areas. And then also going forward, I suppose it's within our purview to pick line items from different models. In other words, we may adopt model 3 for auxiliary, model 2 for teachers and librarians, and something else for, some of the others. But the way that it's outlined there would allow us to still be able to calculate what that would roll down to.
Jennifer, what is your thought about what other districts do as far as breaking it up like that?
So we do get that question. So what we typically call that is like a mixed model, to where you would provide different GPIs for different groups. And there are some districts that are very comfortable, boards are very comfortable in districts about language and communicating that to employees, and it's not a problem. Like that is just their practice. There are other districts that really struggle with wanting to message that to employees, that different employees would receive different percentages. So I think it is a comfort level and what that would look like. I think we do see more mixed models going into these last couple of years because there has been a push for wanting to increase hourly pay. And so we've been giving more percentage in teachers, right, and priorities. And I think with districts that are going to have less budgeted money, that we're probably going to see that more, to where in the past we would see definite across the board. But I do think that is, you know, based on obviously budget, but what you feel comfortable messaging to employees. And that can be challenging sometimes, especially in just our environment in public education right now.
The goal would be to get every single position to be right around market value, right around 100%. Right now, we're sitting with our pay structures at a little above 100% in every single position. So the goal is to always try to keep pace. The market usually increases about 2%, although last year with ESSER, that was kind of an anomaly. It increased more across the board. But if we want to remain competitive, usually you need to increase by 2% because the market increases by 2%. And otherwise, people are going to be stealing your employees.
Well, and we know what our needs are, we know what we've been trying to do the last couple of years, we know what we've been comfortable doing. But we also know that there are some levels that may not be sustainable long term. Why I'm interested in seeing this without corpus is I don't think there's going to be a huge disparity in our teachers and librarians, nor in our auxiliary or clerical professionals. But I think there could be a large discrepancy with our administrative profession without Corpus Christi in them. When we look at the direct surrounding districts that we have, I think we have done some things that we needed to do to achieve some goals that we needed to achieve. But we really got to take a hard look at some of that once the piggy bank starts speaking.
Yeah, we're going to look at that in just a moment. Other question for Jennifer before we release her.
Thank you.
Give me just a minute to get set up here, please. Before we move forward, it would be a good idea to look at when we want to try to adopt the compensation schedule. So let's refer to the budget calendar. Here we are, TASB pay study review revenues, expenditures, which we're going to do employee compensation and stipends. What we had on the board is to approve it at 6:20, which would be the next board meeting in 2 weeks. And we'll see, we can get answers to those questions, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. The problem is that really waiting till the next board meeting 7/18 is too late. So we would need to probably have a special board meeting somewhere in there to approve the compensation schedule, because the compensation schedule is maybe 78% of our budget. So we can't really decide and move forward with everything else until we pass that. The other thing is we're hiring employees very quickly. And if we don't pass anything, other districts are going to gobble them up. TASB recommends that even though, like right now, we expected to have a whole bunch more information, but they're going to have to pass anything in special sessions. So right now, TASB recommends that you pass what you can afford right now, and then if they mandate something a lot higher later on, that you move forward with that. But at least that would allow us to move forward with the rest of our budget. So as we move into what we're doing with salaries, again, if we don't go on the 20th, we probably need to find time soon after that, if possible, the next week to move forward with adopting something for compensation. Questions on that?
I'd like to just at least hear what the damage is gonna be before we.
Yes. Okay. And then as you can see, step,
But Dr. Pitts, the entirety of the budget process is a shot in the dark this year.
Right.
Because we have no earthly idea of what kind of revenues we're getting from the state.
you're right, and we're gonna look at that in just a minute. I have been talking to Mike that hasn't been on. All right, so you're right, we're gonna take a look at some of those issues right now. Okay, so we're gonna move into a discussion on what can we afford and where we are in the budget now. So let's preface this with, we've been talking about the ESSER cliff, and we're not the only ones that are gonna experience that. Basically, our ESSER funds are running out. And we've been living high on the hog, and we've been able to do some very big things that we need to do for the district. And at the same time, we've had to spend this ESSER money, because if we don't spend it, we're gonna lose it. But now I have put together the best projected estimate with no information from the state, because we really can't wait. I have to show you exactly where I think we're gonna understand with very little information. So let me pull up here. This projection. If you look at the very top. I do. So if you look at the very top, let me again stress that this is very preliminary in some areas, because we have very little information right now. Nothing has been passed, but I wanted to put together something. If you look at the top line, that's how much ESSER funding we are projected to use by the end of this year, $7.7 million of ESSER funding. Right underneath that, you see how much ESSER funding is left for next year, 1.8 million. And then after that, there's no ESSER funding after that. So we are going to have to absorb somewhere $5.9 million of ESSER funds to the general fund next year that we again won't have in ESSER funding. So I'm going to refer to that number a little bit later on, that 5.9 million. But basically what that 5.9 million represents is that's how much less money we're going to receive next year. 5.9 million less than what we're receiving this year. And nothing goes away. Everything that we're required to do for security, all the security officers' unfunded mandates, they gave us a $200,000 one time, which we've already spent way more than that we're going to have to continue every year. And as a matter of fact, they're increasing how much we need to spend for security, because now you need to have a security person on every single campus. That includes CARES and DAP, but we're looking at what we can do with those as well. So they are also requiring us to keep doing everything instructionally with House Bill, what's the number again? Somebody. 4545. I want to say 4444, but House Bill 4545. So we have to continue providing all that support as well too. And at the same time, we have to remain competitive with salaries. Luckily, the last 2 years, we have increased salaries to remain competitive. But now the question is, how do we sustain it now that ESSER funding is drying up? So again, that first three rows, we're gonna be losing $5.9 million in ESSER funding this next year in 23-24. Okay, so where are we? How are we able to sustain that? First, let's look at the fund balance. In 2022, our fund balance was 8.9 million. And I wanted to point out that before that, it was even 6.8 million. So our fund balance has been a lot lower than what it was. We knew that this ESSER cliff was coming and we prepared well. Right now, our fund balance in 2023 is 12.6 million. So again, we knew that this was coming. We've set aside some money to prepare for this. As you can see, our minimum 90-day fund balance is $9.1 million. That's what you're recommended to have. And as a matter of fact, to get the highest rating in your financial ratings in that category, there are other ratings as well too. You need to have at least $9.1 million. So right now we are 3.5 million to the good in our surplus. So that's a good thing. Now, so that's what we have to draw on as a reserve. Can we go lower than 9.1 million? Absolutely. We have been down as low as 6.8 million before. So we can dip below that. We can't go below zero in our fund balance, otherwise we're bankrupt. But right now, we're not bankrupt. We have $12.6 million. And again, that is a healthy surplus right now, too. So let's take a look at the next group, which basically shows how much we are spending in our fund balance in general, in our general fund this year, and how much we're expected to spend in the general fund next year. So right now, it's still early. But if we continue on our current trajectory, we will spend $28.6 million this year from the general fund. Now, next year, we're going to have to spend a lot more in our general fund because we're going to have less ESSER funding. So if you look at that second row, that 5.9 million matches what we had in the third row up top. That's how much less funding we're going to have in ESSER that we're going to have to absorb from the general fund down there. Now, we're also, if the board approves raises, what I built in there was a 2% raise, if the board approved a 2% raise. If the property insurance, it's going to be several $100,000 more for property insurance. You saw what happened last year. We have to factor that in because the rate the market is going. I built in a 25% increase, not the 40% we saw last year, but 25% increase in property insurance. And then repairs. If we decide to do some of those things on the priority list that we put in the last session that we had on all of our, basically our facility review. All of that we project to be about $1.95 million extra above and beyond what we're spending this year. We are going to be losing some position attrition. What you see right there is right now we have 12 projected positions that we prepare to lose, but that'll be something that slowly over the next several years we will be losing staff. And the reason for that is because we need to get our ratios at 6.3 students per staff member. Right now we're at about 5.7 students per staff member. So 7-8 years ago, our staffing ratios were about 6.5 students per staff member. We actually have a lot less staff now, but the reason is that we have less students now than we had 7 or 8 years ago as well too. And we know the reasons for that. The reasons for that are that the surrounding districts, they have about 1,500 of our students that live in our attendance zone. That is the challenge that we're facing right now, that we have significantly less students than we did 7 or 8 years ago, because again, the surrounding districts are absorbing some of our students. So what that means when that happens, when we lose students, we have to reduce staff accordingly. Otherwise, we will never be able to balance the budget, because they give you a certain amount of money per student. They give you a basic allotment, but then they also give you a certain amount of money extra for special education students, depending on their instructional placement setting. Also for CTE, and then for students that are also below the poverty line as well too.
And we started absorbing some of those positions when we consolidated the two schools, Clayburgh and Memorial. And so it's only been 2 years, we've been doing that.
Just to give you an idea, 7 or 8 years ago, we had 538 personnel. Now we have 474. So we've been starting the process and moving in that direction. Unfortunately, before the last administration really did not decrease the levels of staffing as they needed to with students, and now we're having to try to pick up the pieces and move in that direction. I do want to mention that we are looking at reducing staffing through attrition. We are not looking at anybody losing their jobs at all. In the education world, usually there's about 20% turnover every year. So this is a possible thing to do through attrition. But now that ESSER is over, and again, we needed those staff to try to get where we need to be as far as get our scores up. Now we're going to have to really look at absorbing those positions. And we have this year already, when we've had some vacancies, we're looking at, instead of advertising and filling those vacancies, we're looking at moving personnel around and absorbing positions. That's where we're going to need to be at right now in the future until we get our staffing levels at that 6.3 students per staff. And again, that'll be over the next 3 years that we look at doing that.
This is nothing different we've been doing for the past 2 years, so.
How many resignations have we had up to today?
I need to get that from Dr.
We
Holt.
need HR here, right?
But the chart, the staffing chart that we're gonna give you all, that we usually give in July, but right now, there's a lot of movement. Like just today, we hired 3 released, so Dr. Holt has been being really good about keeping up with that, so we'll. Remember the charts and the color coded charts? Yeah, I'll give you that. But it's just changing every day.
But as far as the high need, the maths, the ELAs, the sciences, the tested areas, we're not gonna overload those classrooms at 35 or 40, but we're gonna keep our English classes
Correct.
at a number that.
In the master scheduling process, like they're here right now, the principals, like all of the EOC courses.
Yeah.
Those should have the smallest class sizes. The STAR courses also, and I know Dr. Farah and Ms. Tobias have been working very closely also with the principals and Dr. Best and I to make sure that when we're looking at those numbers, we're looking at the higher level APs, English 3s and 4s, those can have higher numbers. But the ones that are STAR related or special ed classes, we need to keep it as small as possible and then increase in the others.
So that's what teachers, you're looking at strategic ratios with teachers. They've talked a little bit about those ratios, but when you look at all other staff, there are benchmarks for other staff as well. For instance, for elementary schools, you should have 4.5 clerical staff per 1,000 students. For secondary, you should have 5.5 clerical staff per 1,000 students. So there are published ratios out there by TEA, KISD, and other organizations where we're not flying blind. We know exactly what the goal is for each of the different clerical, auxiliary, professional, where we need to get to. It's just a matter of getting there over time through attrition.
And those ratios then are those are recommendations, not mandates. It's recognized the need of our district and what we can.
Right, and that is one thing that we continue to have those conversations about, is that I see that that's a recommendation, but if you look at Kingsville ISD and how deep we are and some concerns we have, especially in the special ed area, and we keep getting more students in special ed, we can't just do a blanket decision that, we're not gonna handicap our teachers that way or our staff that way, so we have to really look at that as much as possible, closely as possible.
So there's a balance between meeting student needs and safety and everything that's mandated right now, the unfunded mandates and the budget. And right now, we have a surplus fund balance right now, so we have time. We need to be moving in that direction, but we need to be moving in it strategically. We cannot just say we're gonna get all the way to the 6.3 ratio, which would be a reduction of about 54 staff all at once. It's something where we have to, again, make sure we're meeting needs, and luckily we have prepared for this moment. We have set aside money so that we can gradually, strategically get to our staffing ratios that need to be there.
And I have to commend y'all, I have to commend the finance department and everybody else, because we did prepare, we did build this cushion. We kept saying, this is gonna come, and some other districts maybe have not prepared this type of a cushion. But we still have to continue to plan conservatively, because we just don't know what the state is gonna do.
And I know I've been asked before to use more of that ESSER money, but again, this is what was coming, this is what we're preparing for. So I think at least we anticipated that, and we have some time to get our levels back where they need to be. So underneath position attrition, if you go to line 19, you see budget allocation reduction. So this is very preliminary. In the next month and a half, I will be meeting with every department. After I meet with Dr. Pettis and the leadership team, then I'll be meeting with every department and every campus to look at their budgets. And we will be looking at reductions. And again, the reductions are justified, because when you have less students, you should have less needs. Everybody is given an allocation per pupil. That way the campuses that have more students, they get a per pupil ratio. When you look at Title I, they are given a per pupil ratio of students that are below the poverty line. So whereas with the general fund, it's total students overall.
Could you bring something as far as, sorry for interruption, I'm just on top of my head. The year in attendance from day one to the last day of school, what was our average by month, or however you want to do it, but so we can see where we're at and where, I mean, I know that we plan for it as far as that is concerned, but I'd like to see those numbers for the whole year.
We can bring that, definitely.
By campus.
By campus.
Because you're right, Mr. Mudales, that is how we are funded.
Yeah.
We're not funded based on the number of students that we have enrolled. We're funded based on the number of students that come to school. And every day, when every student that misses a day costs the district $30 per student, which doesn't seem like a lot. But it adds up so much, and that's not including that if they're in CTE or if they have an additional special education allocation as well too. So it really adds up across the district. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands or even more millions of dollars, depending on how many students are coming to school. So.
And we are going to have our truant officer come and do a presentation about that. We do need to have a hard conversation about, what are we spending for that, department, and what are we getting for it? And during the STAR testing, we had great attendance. But we should be putting that same effort every day.
So on line 19, again, you see the preliminary, again, in another month, when I come here with the regular budget, I'll have much more accurate numbers as far as what we can produce after I've met with everybody. But I wanted to get something out here ahead of time so that we can use it for making the salary decisions. You look at the projected expenditures in 2024 with all the pluses and minuses, about 34.3 million or closer to $34.4 million. Whereas last year from the general budget, we only had to spend about 28.6 million because a lot of those expenditures were absorbed through ESSER. So let me scroll down just a little bit. Okay, so we have no information right now, just preliminary. 31 million is the estimated revenues. How did I get that? Well, estimated revenues for this year are about 30.5 million. They are projecting just a very small increase for next year. Again, without going through any of our formulas because they don't have them yet. That's how I arrived at the $31 million right there. So if we were to spend 34.3 million, again, very rough, we think we can cut down more on that. And when I do that, again, I budget conservatively. For instance, I have in there $100,000 budgeted for deductible for our property insurance. In other words, if a storm came by and we have to pay $100,000 before everything else. I have that budgeted in there. So with my conservative budgeting, we could be looking at worst case scenario, having to use $3.4 million in fund balance next year. If the state doesn't come through on their extra aid, if we have catastrophes where we have to use our deductibles from our insurance. But again, if you look above, we have a fund balance surplus of 3.5. If everything fell the wrong way, the state doesn't come through with a lot of extra funding, we'd still be above that $9.1 million because we have been preparing wisely for this occurrence. Again, right now, we have very preliminary information on the expenditure side and also even more preliminary information on the revenue side. So when we come back in July, we'll have much more exact information.
Well, my question is going to be is, we have a cushion in the fund balance of 3.5. If everything goes wrong,
Correct.
and we use up 3.4, we've used up our cushion.
That's correct.
That's just.
So the question is, what if everything goes wrong and we do have to do that? Then what happens? What type of situation is the district in? Well, we would still have $9.1 million, a little more than that, let's say 9.2 or $9.3 million. What happens if we were to dip below that? Well, we have been as low as 6.8 before. We'd actually been in the 5s before that, but just a couple of years ago, we were at 6.89. Are we able to do that? We are able to do that. The district is not bankrupt or anything if we do that. What it affects is it affects one or two of our financial indicators. But again, we have been there before. So is there a possibility that we might have to do that? It depends on how quickly we're able to cut over the next couple of years and how bad things fall. But will the district still be able to sustain that? We will. We will be able to sustain down another year or two past that. But we have to reduce, either reduce staffing or increase the number of students that are coming on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, we will not be able to sustain past a couple of years.
Try to get those kids back on a daily basis. You know, that's something we have to work on.
And the legislature is not really.
But prior to me coming on board, we did have a deficit, didn't we? We had a big deficit.
Right. So we had a $2 million deficit before. That was not last year, but that was the year before. But actually that was the budget year before that. So that would have been 2019, 2020, that we had a huge deficit. Then in 2020, 2021, we had, we did pretty well. And in 21, 2022, we did pretty well as well. We don't have yet 22, 2023. The interesting thing about this is that you don't know how you're going to end up till way after the year ends. And there's several reasons why. First of all, you don't know how much revenue you're going to get because you don't know how many students came to the school. Then second of all, there is a settle up in September, and that settle up is based on how much you collected from property taxes. If you collect more in property taxes, then the state says, you know what, we're going to give you less. We're not going to give you anything for that. The only way collecting more in property taxes helps you is on the debt side. On the debt side, if you collect more, that's why we're able to do the cash deficits, because we collected more, property values went up, we collected more money, we're able to use some of that extra money to pay off the debt. So hopefully we can go out for a bond, maybe before 11 more years if we're able to keep doing that. But the other thing is that on the M&O side, if for some reason you collect more money, they just take it away. You don't get anything else for that. That's a problem. They give a balance. They say that based on your student population, you're going to get from the general fund, we are going to give you $31 million. That's it. And if you collect more in your from your property taxes, we're just going to subtract the difference and we're going to be less. So it doesn't really help us at all.
That's several questions. In terms of the raises, property insurance and repairs. Okay, the raises, that's about 640 based on the numbers that we saw. What are we looking at in property insurance and repair? Just the increase, because the actual amount would already be included in the 28 million.
Right, we're looking at possibly 275,000 extra. This year we increased about 400,000 extra. So I'm budgeting in a good amount, but not as nobody expects to see 40%.
How much maintenance did you?
About 850,000.
Okay.
But and then the balance is miscellaneous, smaller things.
Physician nutrition 650. How many people is that?
12.
Okay. There's close. Budget allocation reduction. It's basically about a 5% across the board.
Well, it's going to need to be closer to 10% across the board. The reason why is because there's some things that you just can't decrease.
I hear you, but we're also looking at inflation 7-8%.
That's
So this is going to be extremely painful. Now, I realize there's a lot to get.
That's correct.
The 90-day fund, 9 million, that's a little high. Based on what we actually have in expenditures.
We've never had that much except after Esser.
I got you. And you know, that time force 36, we're budgeting a 34. So there is some fluff here. I fully suspect that we will be adopting a deficit budget. We have to. And it's going to be a $3.5 million deficit budget, saying that we're going to need to go into our reserve. But we have always budgeted extremely conservative, and we have consistently come out above what we had and better than we initially budgeted. And there are some people who criticize us for that. I think it's admirable. I think it shows keeping an eye on the ball and also being realistic in what we do.
You would rather budget for the uncertainties and worst case scenario instead of later on not budget enough and then be surprised the other way.
Now, am I correct that in addition, okay, this year we've got to absorb 5.9 million and the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. But will we add the 1.8 million to that in the following years?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things that could change. Again, we are expecting eventually to, if we don't in this biennium get a big increase, we're expecting to hopefully get a large increase next biennium. But overall, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to either reduce the number of positions through attrition and reduce the amount that we spend to get to pre-COVID levels, or we're going to have to increase the average daily attendance, one of the two.
Any further questions? All right. Go back to your calendar. Okay. Because we've got issues there. Much as I hate to say this, we may have to look at this 620. Past 620, we start getting crazy. We're the board, the administration is out the first week of July. It does not make sense to have a board meeting in that first week that they're back. So the 18th is kind of there. The last week of June, possibly, but that's only 7 more days. So we've got a tough budget schedule this year, and it's not because we're behind, it's because we don't have the information we need. And we don't know when we're gonna get it. If ever.
What TASB has recommended is you pass what you can afford. And then if the legislature comes in later and says that we need to give a higher increase, then you do it at that time, but they're recommending that you do something. The other thing again is that it puts us behind on everything else until we get salaries and stipends passed, and it puts you behind on everything else.
I understand, and that's why. Go ahead and put it on the agenda for 6:20. Whether we actually hit it or are comfortable making a decision at that point, we'll address at that point.
Any other questions on the salaries before we move to the stipends?
So in your best recommendation, can we afford a 2% thing?
Well, so let's go back to. Let's go back to the cost for each of those. So the cost difference between them is very minimal. Well, I won't say very minimal, but look at 1%, $471,000. Look at 1.5, 558, and look at 2% is 639. So in order to remain competitive, like Mr. Kufal had a good point. Well, like, let's say we take out Corpus Christi and let's say we take out Gregory Portland, let's say. Okay. All right, somebody brought that up, but let's say we take out Corpus Christi. And right now, our pay structures are pretty good. They're just a little bit above 100%, which is across the board, which is where you want to be. The market is going to increase by 2%. If we don't do anything, then we're going to be closer to market. And in some areas, we're going to be below market. So can we either any of the three that we do, as Mr. Kufal said, we are going to have to use some of our surplus reserves for any of the three that we do. But the difference between them is so little that if we are going to attract the best personnel and remain competitive at market, the difference between 2 and 1.5 and 1 is minimal. And so it's not going to make very much difference in that respect. So I don't know if that answers your question. Can we afford it?
She also mentioned that more and more school districts, as time goes on, is doing a mix of things, and we have to determine that. And so saying we're going to do an across the board of this amount is going against the grain of what's happening in the rest of the world. So that's something that I good. But also the idea, this board expects the state of Texas to reach into their surplus to give us additional funds. So I don't see why we as a district can't do the same. That's just my recommendation. We have a surplus. We need best quality teachers. So let's pay them.
And I think if we consider doing like a mix, it might lessen the amounts.
And what we've got here is that from what we just went through, funding the 639,000 is doable through the numbers that you work. And it takes us about where we need to be to our 90%. That's not the tricky part. That's the easy part. The tricky part is that has to be sustained year after year after year. And another 2% added to it the next year, most likely to stay in this deal. So that's where I appreciate the fact that we do this, and I appreciate specifically the fact that it shows us kind of where we are in comparison to them. I just really would like to see it without Corpus Christi.
I can do that. And again, 2 years ago, we were way below. And again, we worked really hard to get up there, which you need to do, because otherwise you're gonna lose the best people to other districts.
Have lots of people this, but we've got some pay grades that were 108% and 109%. I'm not saying that we have to go straight across the board, but I don't think that they need to get the same pay raise or pay raises compared to somebody that we're getting, we're right at 101%. Because you're right, if everybody else moves up 2%, we're now 99% instead of above, but that 109% is still going to be 7% more than the market. And that's why I'm talking about let's do this mix and say, you're right, we need to stay competitive.
So you can create some mixed models.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe if I could have a little bit of direction on what the board wants to see, given the tight timeline, and that we don't want to be figuring this out on the 20th.
What I would like to see is just these same models run with the exclusion of Corpus. And I think that gives me the information I need to make the decision that I need.
I just don't think it's gonna make that one.
I think it's gonna be huge.
It will not be.
Well, with one district,
Administration is gonna be, it's gonna be huge.
Not with teachers.
No, teachers is not gonna have effect. Teachers, librarians, bus drivers, it's not gonna have effect, but it is gonna have effect on administration. When you take Corpus Christi out of the mix, I believe it's gonna have an effect on perhaps central and perhaps campus. I'm not saying we need to do anything drastic, but I think we have to have the information before us.
Is there any
So-
way to get a comparison on their attendance as opposed to ours? Is there, I mean, is public that much, is that public where if somebody is comparable to us, in a 4A district, what is their attendance compared to our attendance?
I think the closest one goes from that group is Beeville.
Well, yeah, Beeville, yeah.
this
yeah,
year, there's people
Robstown.
don't submit the data yet, and it's
Yeah.
not public right now. Previous years, you could possibly get that information.
You know, and also like, just like, we've had 4 positions that we're gonna have absorbed. Based on the resignations, and we don't even know how many we have fed. Because looking at the different campuses, you anticipate more positions being absorbed at the campuses. And if so, you know, like, how many?
Yeah.
100,000, or another 8 positions that can be absorbed.
We said the pattern is usually like 20%, correct?
20% overall. But again, what you see more turnover in teachers than anything else. Like
I'm
your
not talking about just teachers.
Right.
It can be clerical, it can be any.
clerical and auxiliary, you don't see as much turnover. So those are positions that's a little bit harder to absorb because sometimes they don't leave.
But
But we do have some.
Yeah, we do have
some recent.
We
We
have some-
talk about sustainability, you save 650,000 through attrition. And if that's the projection going forward, then we have to increase again, well, there's your sustainability through attrition. Just think.
Because that would be 650 now.
And then our attendance is what we're.
I'm sure. Attrition every year.
So I will put together something without Corpus Christi ISD in there and get you the data without Corpus Christi ISD. And then if there's anything else that is needed, I'll be happy to set up.
List of all the resignations by position and
Yeah.
more or less how many of those we can actually absorb.
We know for sure we're absorbing 12, for sure.
And that's
And
That's a lot.
yeah, you're gonna have those numbers in your budget numbers. When you are proposing for us what the proposed salary budgets need to be next year, you will have already come into account those being replaced through
Right, when we come in August, I'll have taken that into account, we'll already know all that.
Well, the next thing I want to ask is you're talking about the number of students, again, the 6.3 students is what our goal is. What is the magic of 6.3?
Well, the magic, so teams, we get an error or we get a deduction whenever you have less than 6.3 students, 6.3 students per staff member. So in the past, we've had like 7, 8 years ago, we had 6.5 or 6.6. They say the sweet spot is anywhere from 6.3 to 14. So 6.3 puts us at the very low end of the range. But that is the recommendation from TEA, and that's what at least we don't get dinged on if we're not below that. But it also helps you to balance the budget if you're at least at that level.
No, I understand what you're saying, at least that level. How much of it being as a.
What you mean on a financial rating?
Oh, on the financial.
Well, why don't we go 7?
That
That'd be great.
would be really hard to do. Just to get to 6.3, we're talking 54.
Well, that's, I mean, I'm talking about over time, but you're saying the sweet spot is 6.3 to 14.
Yeah, I'd like to bring it 14 if it's achievable, but you've got to have a lean, thin machine.
Well, the other thing is the 14, you're looking at bigger districts where you have economies of scale.
And you probably don't have, you know, what we have to take into consideration here also is that compared to our surrounding districts and compared to the number, the schools that we're looking at, I'd be willing to bet that our special ed population is larger than most of them. And because it is, that's going to directly impact our ratios.
And I can agree with that. That's why I'm asking these questions, though, is I don't expect to be at 14. But our target is 6.3. That's why I was just asking. Why don't our target a little, just a hair more than that, maybe it's 6.3, 6.5. But if we're targeting things and we're moving things to say this is what we're going for, at some point, we may have to say we're going. And we're gonna have a higher student ratio than what we want. But if we're looking at all these other different things, I think that should be on the, we can rule it out. It can be the first thing we rule out. And I'll be happy with that, but I'm just asking, why did we hit that number? And you answered it. But I just didn't know what was special about that number.
Well, you're right that eventually there's only so much in the fund balance. Eventually the money's going to run dry. Luckily, again, we knew that this problem was coming and we have prepared for it, but this is an issue that we do have to solve. And there's only 2 ways. One is to reduce expenditures, and the biggest part of expenditures is personnel. Or 2 is to increase the revenues, which really means increasing the number of students that are coming to our classrooms.
This Chapa and Brian Kufall are the only 2 that are going to be here about running for election. What they're gonna have to do.
But the more students we can get in every day and starting from day one and not giving a huge cushion to say, okay, at this time, we're gonna start going after the kids to get them in school. It needs to start day one. Everything needs to happen early and not later in the year. That's a predicament we're in right now as far as attendance. We started late and you know, I don't know how many kids with work, I don't know how many, you know, warning, I don't know anything about that. So that's why I want that report, so I can know what do we need to do to get moving forward and starting early and not later.
This is a trend that has happened ever since COVID. It seems that kids got used to remote instruction during COVID and they got used to being home. And it's been really tough to get the same attendance percentages after COVID.
I understand that 100%. Yeah. I understand that. Wanted to stay home or, you know, I understand all that. But, you know, we need to quit looking back and we need to start moving forward because we're not in that position anymore. So we need to just move forward with everything we're doing and quit looking back 2 years. You know, everybody would love to do that. There's a lot of people working from home, you know, that are still working from home. But this is a whole brand new day and time now. That's all behind us. You know.
And we really need our staff, and we need to model being here daily. You know, we had the incentive, you know, we were able to get $500 gift cards. And out of the, you know, 476 people, we had about 50 that had perfect attendance for a few weeks. And so that was kind of disappointing, you
How
know,
did we do it like short term? Like,
that was short term. It was how many weeks?
yeah, we might need to do it
I
like.
think it was 4 weeks.
Spring, and not just 4 weeks at the end or whatever. Or, you know, something.
That's sad that we come to that, you know,
Well, it is sad, but I mean, it's, and that's a problem everywhere.
and there are some mixed messages being sent because you hear from the government, from ourselves, you know, we're not necessarily out of COVID. If you don't feel well, stay home. You know, it used to be, I don't care how you feel, get your butt to school, you know? And there's been a
They
change.
relaxed so much as far as COVID rules. Before 14 days and 5 days, and you can come wear a mask. I mean,
I know.
we're moving forward now, because this thing is a flu as of right now that I think.
Let me just go back to that $500 attendance incentives. Those were all donations. They were not KISD.
No, that's. Be out there looking for donations.
Now, when we talk about donations, I think another thing that we really need to consider is if we decide to go for a track, that is a community, really a community benefit. And you would think that we would be able to get, the KISD would not have to fit the full bill. We should be able to get some donations for that.
Yeah, but with donations come relinquishment of control. And so you've got.
It is open to the public.
We've got to be more than happy.
There's a backup.
Except during the day. Except during the day. And looking at real property that we were looking at too, you know. we've got some-
So that is one plus. What is not considered in all my numbers is what was just approved. So that is not considered that $625,000.
And I don't think that needs to go in operating.
Yes.
Let's do stipends.
Okay. All right, so
I know that. Your,
It's him, his player. Yeah.
executive decision. So we might.
So let's take a look at the stipends. You see the 2022, 2023, what was approved, and then you see what is expected in 23, 2024, if the board approves it. So anything that is a change is in a color. If you notice, let's look at the academic stipends first. Anything in red is grandfathered, which means that if a new person came into the district, for instance, for librarian certified, we would not pay that anymore. The reason why is because other districts don't pay that. It's kind of an anomaly for us, but we have one person in that position, and that it has been our practice to not take away stipends for people that have been continuing employees. So you see that one in red right there. And then the green are the ones that are proposed additionally for next year. So if you look, starting at the very top, one thing that has been really hard to attract this year is quality teachers that are in either adaptive education or early child or behavior. We have been able to get special education teachers that want to do inclusion. That hasn't been as hard to attract, but we are proposing an additional $1,000 above and beyond what all the other special education teachers get, the $2,500, because those have been especially hard areas to fill and to retain. Avid, we have an Avid program now, in that that avid teacher does a lot of additional responsibilities. We are proposing one stipend next year of $1,200 for avid. If you scroll down, the only other thing that we're proposing new for next year is our elementary club stipend. This year, we had some elementary teachers that did things like the running club after school, or that did ballet folklorico, or that did the junior ROTC. I guess high school is junior ROTC, maybe this would be baby ROTC or something like that. But and those teachers, they were paid this year at an hourly rate for what they did, but it's really closer to a stipend. We kind of layered it at what a UIL stipend was at the same level there. We're proposing 3 at each campus, and we didn't want to specify because different campuses wanted different things. So we are proposing 3 allocated club stipends at each of the elementary schools for what that particular principal and staff chooses to do there. I'll take any questions that you have on the academic stipends.
Who monitors that? I mean, who monitors whether or not through the year it was worth the $600 to have this person be this person?
Each club sponsor or UIL has somebody on the instructional side that they report to. The only one that reports otherwise is the chess that reports to me, just because I was the one that created the chess program and usually oversees that. But I can tell you how I do that. Basically, they are given a certain amount for every meeting that they have with students. If they don't have the required number of meetings, they are docked for that. They don't get the full stipend. They are given a certain amount of money for each tournament that they go to. And if they don't attend a tournament, they don't get paid for that tournament. Every meeting that I have with sponsors. So all of the UIL is on the instructional side, and all of the clubs would also be reported to on the side as well. Probably Dr. Farah, Dr. Tobias, do you want to?
We do monitor the UIL, and each campus has a UIL coordinator that directs that comes to us.
What about the club?
Where's your chess person? Be on you.
Where are they?
Okay,
So you have 5?
There are 5.
all right, so when you get further on down into these elementary clubs, like, let's say, okay, we're gonna have a stamp club, and no kid ever shows up. When does this person get this money?
So the campus principals work with the teachers to determine the clubs, and they monitor that participation. So like at Harvey, they had the dance team, they had the safety patrol, and they had, well, that one wasn't that. So they had those 2. And so they had an attendance roster, they met, and so the principal takes care of the clubs like a cheer sponsor would do or a dance sponsor would do. The UIL is a different type of contract that comes through us.
And we talked about that all last year or the year before, they all started rolling together. But on the UILs in terms of sign-up sheet and kind of minimums and all that kind of stuff, that somebody was gonna make sure that it was kind of watched.
And that's why, like all those that were here with their, celebrated, it's happening. But the principal has to have their sign-in fees and you want.
Those type of stipends are paid at the end of the year based on whether they turn in all those sign-in sheets. Other stipends, for instance, like if you're assistant band director, those are annualized. Basically, the total stipend is divided by 12 and paid every month. But the ones where kids have to, that are dependent upon moments in time, whether kids show up or whether kids go to meets or the sponsor goes to the meet, those are paid at the end of the year based on whether the sponsor fulfilled their responsibilities.
I'm gonna go back 15 years, 20 years or so, because so I don't pick on anybody. but like, there aren't newspapers anymore, but there used to be UIL events for headline writing and feature writing and that kind of stuff. If and it was a group of kids who did them all. So if a sponsor is like on headline writing and feature writing and all that, are they getting a stipend for each one of those events?
You're talking about the sponsors?
Yeah.
If a sponsor does multiple events, they get the stipends for each event. Now, the number of events, I believe, was limited last year.
It was based on attendance, so they couldn't sponsor an event with one student, but it could cover multiple grade levels, so like, the music one was. Music memory things. Music memory, it could go across second, third, fourth grade, but they might have one for each grade level, but it's just one music memory stipend, no matter the grade level.
It's like back in the day, there would be slide rule and numbers and slide rule. It's doing all these events with a same sponsor. One kid would be in 4 events, but there was one meeting. And really, it's not fair for that sponsor to be paid 4 times when really they're just meeting 1 time when the other events were, and I just want to make sure we're not having abuses.
Dr. Pitts, I had a question about like. Stipends, are they within the departments or is it just a general revenue fund? For example, does Coach Garcia have his stipends for athletics and Mr. Mendez has his for his staff, or is it just all general if they're not used?
Well, it is all general. It's not part of their budget. Like they're given a budget that is for their supplies, but everything that's for salaries and stipends are considered part of salaries is administered through the district. It's not something that's under their control once it is approved by the board.
Okay. And do we have some of these people who receive stipends who are from the community, like community members who are not staff, who are not faculty?
Well, we do have, there are 1 or 2 that are either paraprofessionals or temporary employees. But that's few and far between.
But they're temporary for something other than just getting the stipend.
Correct. It's not that they don't have any affiliation with the district.
Does that penalize them for receiving the full stipend, or is that different? Do they get half or a different set?
No, it's the same stipend. The only thing that it could possibly change the stipend amount is if they arrived later in the year or left earlier in the year, then their stipend would be prorated.
Now, like fine arts, they have like the consultants that they pay for. So that, would be, that's something different. That's a different budget. So that might be what you might be wondering about, but this would be the employees. But this one would be the employees.
Oh,
So the consultant fee, like, or he hires consultants, for drill team, different things, that'd be a consulting fee.
Any other questions on the academic stipends before we move to the athletic stipends?
Marty and public will ask questions, so I'll keep that. Under the access to certified librarian. We had one, we're expecting one, and it's a $0 stipend. They may have one that's grandfathered in, and we pay, but we're not any new employees.
Okay, so we're paying that person $1,000, but any new person that comes in would be $0. We would not continue that stipend in the future. Sorry about that confusion.
Well, and then also we have to have for teaching for the grandfather in.
Okay, thank you. So that one we did talk about it a little bit before. You're right. That one, as those 4 people leave, we won't be paying it anymore, but we're still paying it for those 4 people. Thank you for catching that. Okay, let's move on to the athletic stipends. So we're gonna focus on the ones that are, well, let's first of all look at the red that are grandfathered. The reason why
It's on the blue.
okay, so no, the blue ones are the they're actually supposed to be purple, but those are the reductions. So, but let's start with the red color first. So the red are the grandfathers. So right now we have one tennis coach at the high school, but he is currently the stipend is currently a little bit more than 6,000. It's closer to 6,400, but we would move it down to 6,000 if we got somebody new in. And the reason for that is because the recommendation is that all team sports are paid the same thing across the board. All individual sports are the same thing across the board. So if you look at other individual sports like powerlifting, notice how that's $6,000. We want to be equitable, but at the same time, we don't want to take away something that was before we actually did the study to align them all together. So that's the reason why. Same thing with tennis at middle school, same thing with volleyball. Once those people leave, we will change those stipends down. They're all a couple $100 more right now than what.
But if they don't leave, they're gonna receive this.
They're gonna receive that because it's been our policy to do that.
Okay, but hang on, having said that last year we went to the 7,000 for speed. Right?
That's correct for the varsity head for team, yes.
Then why is tennis varsity head at 6?
That is considered an individual sport. So the market value for what other districts pay for individual sports is less than what they pay for team sports. So it's all compared to market value.
Golf is the same, you have golf at 6,000 also.
That's considered.
Why that individual,
Correct.
don't they
Compete as a team.
compete as a team to go to state?
The market salary for golf is comparable to the other.
The way to explain it is they can go as a team, but you can also go as an individual.
Right.
So like track, you can qualify as an individual, powerlifting as an individual, golf as an individual, tennis as an individual or a team. But like football, softball, basketball,
Just one person.
you can't, just one person can't qualify. It has to be.
Is that something that we can look at changing?
We just changed it to that last year.
I'd say all head varsity sports, get 7,000, let me get the same.
Well, but here's the deal, is that you've got a varsity football that's in charge of how many students versus a varsity ball.
Responsibility to drive a bus, kids, how do you put a price on that?
Well, I understand, but can you put a price on the bus full of 40 kids
No, I
as
understand that.
opposed to a car with 3 kids? And I think that was.
Well, maybe just something we can look at it before, right? Well, we can argue date all day about that. Bless you.
You just, yeah, I mean, we just changed it last year.
We did increase the stipends across the board for athletics, and the reason for that was to be competitive. And again, we're very competitive right now. Again, the reason why the differentiation is because that's what other districts are doing. Other districts are paying more for teams than they are for individual. That's the reason why we have that. But you're right, Mr. Garcia. And at the end, it is the board's decision of what is adopted. We're just bringing what market value.
I mean, just previous, Dr. Pitt, we're talking about raising our teachers and our professional value, so that way we can retain our teachers. What's the difference with our coaches?
Well, I think you're right. I think we want to strive to be at market value for everything, for the stipends, for the teachers, for everything. I agree. If you
Currently with these stipends, we are at
market value, we're actually a little above market value with these stipends.
We can show what the stipend for last year, so we can, y'all can, just to remember how we did it last year, how we improved, actually we increased quite a bit.
So let's take a look at the blue or the purple. The blue or the purple is what we're proposing to absorb. So cross-country, we had a varsity assistant last year. Coach Garcia is proposing to absorb that because the numbers just are not there to justify that, just like we do with staffing, when the numbers are not there, the positions are absorbed. A golf assistant, the numbers aren't there to have a golf assistant. And then also track at middle school. We're proposing going down from 6 track middle school to 5 track middle school. And instead, if you look 2 below, we're proposing adding a second varsity head. And this is so the total number of track would stay the same, but you would reduce 1 at the middle school level due to numbers and increase 1 at the head. And the reason why this is recommended is that the numbers at track justify having a male head and a female head, and that's what the other districts are moving to for equitability, to have both a male head and a female head coach. If you look a little bit above that at strength and conditioning, we didn't have anybody for strength and conditioning last year, but that's something that benefits all sports. If you look at softball middle school and baseball middle school, we had close to 40 kids in each of those with only 1 coach last year, with 40 kids, and it was very challenging. The numbers at the middle schools justify having an extra coach there at the middle schools for both softball and baseball. I will take any questions, and some of them I may refer to Coach Garcia as well.
Well, I appreciate all the cutting back on those. And I just want to go back to what Brian said earlier, and as everybody has these stories, I'm sure, but when I was in a smaller district, we had a stipend that was a lot of abuse. The teacher who was a bus driver and the track coach, and during track season, he was on his route. So there's no way he was coaching, track practice was an hour and a half in by the time he got there. So I know that, I hope there's a lot of oversight on that, because there can be abuse, and maybe it's not even intended to be that way, but it sure does come out that way. So
I don't think we've had any issues in that regard with someone not being supposed to be doing another route or anything, because I think the only time I've, at least since I've made it this semester, that we've had coaches drive is when they're driving the team to their events. But I do know that I monitor a lot closely, and it's my coaches know I expect a lot out of them. But even now in the summer, with summer strength and conditioning going on, I tell my coaches we expect the kids to be there. I expect you to be there, because how we're going to ask the kids to be there, we're not there coaching them, especially with how they've adjusted the rules with sports specific in the summer and stuff like that. So I will say that I do monitor it. I do hold them accountable, and I'm one that's going to ask them where you're at if they're not where they're supposed to be, and they'll tell you that. I had a meeting when I got hired about it. I've had a meeting going into the summer about it, so they know the expectations, and that's something that I'll continue to monitor.
Strength and conditioning is year round.
Yes, sir.
There are coaches that are piggybacking some of these. You may have a coach that has a football stipend and may also have a baseball stipend.
Correct. Yes,
All right.
sir.
If strength and conditioning is year round, is this person piggybacking another stipend also?
What all of the 4,000 stipend is basically covering that. They're in charge of planning and implementing the strength and conditioning program from grades 7 through 12 in the entire district. So the high school and at Gillette, and it's they're planning it, implementing it, making sure the weekly plan goes out and things of that nature. But all the programs will utilize it. But that's the person that's like in charge of planning. It's the way we do it. It's a lot more planning. It's a lot more detailed. If you ask any of the kids that have done it so far this spring or even in the summer, there's a lot more to it. And it's just a lot of planning, and it's just designating. I know a lot of competitive districts have a strength and conditioning coordinator, Some of them, they don't even teach classes. We're not suggesting that. All we're suggesting is they get a stipend for planning it and implementing it and doing things of that nature.
But they're probably also pushing something else.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, they are. It's not a sole position. They're coaching. It could be volleyball and track, or it could be football, baseball, or it's they're coaching other sports.
There has been an emphasis on strength and conditioning because it prevents kids from getting hurt. You know, and many of our kids get hurt. So when we talked about doing the strength and conditioning, that made much sense. And right now we have a good turnout. Like yesterday was 120 kids or.
Yesterday was a little over 150. Today was about 126. Wow. So we have a lot of kids showing up.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, I appreciate your telling us how much the grandfather did varsity tennis coach was. Could you tell us what the middle school coach and the volleyball varsity assistant? It says his grandfather, I'm curious what it's done.
Let's see. The volleyball varsity assistant, I believe, is 3,800. What was the other one? Middle school tennis, I believe that was 2,500.
So that I can tell you the middle school tennis is gonna go down to 2,250 because the person that was grandfathered in is not gonna be here. He resigned, so.
Okay, so that's no longer grandfather.
Other questions on the athletic staff?
All right, Dr. Pitts, are you
I am finished.
have completed?
I know money done.
All right. Having covered all the items that we had on the agenda for the workshop, I will then declare this meeting adjourned at 8:35. 8:35.
I'm going to say, closed session, really, a good part of that. I pointed it out.
I just want to know.
Executive decision, what was the executive decision?
No, that was approved.
That's my complaint. I'm not, I would complain to